Hello, welcome everybody. Glad you're here. So let's get into this a little bit. I'm going to switch over to my screen and we'll get going here. I will share it right there. Can everybody see that okay? Is that good? Okay. All right, good. Hey, thanks for being here. I call this, I'm going to actually change the title. I'm not in love with the title, but the idea is as a CEO, as a founder, we're playing a game, and that game is growing valuation within our companies. We think we're playing a revenue game, but we're actually playing something different. We're playing a value game that leads to valuation, and that's what we're going to get into here. So it kind of goes a little bit like this. I'll tell you what the presentation is about. So this presentation is about why accounting versus finance is the fundamental comparison that you should, as a founder and CEO, understand in order to confidently grow your valuation in your company. One day, you need to have all the things that you're doing add up to something that is incredibly significant. That's what all the risk is for. That's what we're doing it for. So we have to be doing this in a better, different way. So what I say is, let's start with the basic picture of the difference between accounting and finance, and then we'll fill it in as we go, kind of a thing. So this is the idea. This is not a new concept. Some really good financial experts I've talked about, in fact, have brought this up. So there are several people who've come to this conclusion, and I would imagine that there are some level of CFOs that do understand this. Not all of them. In fact, we used to talk about this. We used to talk about the different types of CEOs that are in a company, right? I mean, CFOs, and we call them. There's accounting CFOs and there's golfing CFOs, right? And the golfing CFOs were the ones that really got into the company's strategy, et cetera. And the accounting CEOs were the ones that were very good at looking after revenue and doing work back schedules and setting goals and things of that nature. I don't want the accounting one. The accounting is something that's very important to your business. You got to know your numbers. Very, very, very interesting, right? It's good input you got to have. I don't mean to diminish it that way, but all the value sitting over in finance side. So let's just compare these two. So the first thing is that accounting is about the past. You're counting what happened in the past to be able to hopefully figure out what to do in the future. Oh, we didn't make enough revenue, therefore we need more money. So now we can go create a strategy to get more revenue in the house, kind of a thing. I don't believe in that. I call that an outside-in approach. What do we need to have? And then how do we make that happen? I see this happening all over the place in business from beginning to end. It's ridiculous. I don't like it. I don't like that. What you need to be doing, and this is how everything works much more fundamentally in this world, is you need an inside-out approach. Inside-out approach, I can talk. Meaning, who am I? What's the value I have, and what's the value of my company, and what kind of a difference can we make in this world? That's what it's really all about. But at any rate, so let's just get into this. I could go down a tangent here, and I already am. So I'm going to kind of stay a little bit more focused here, right? So when we talk about accounting, it's about control. What is going on? How do I know that I have complete control over what my business is doing and how much money it's bringing in? When we're talking in this kind of a language, we're talking, again, in the rearview mirror, we're talking costs and revenue, right? The stuff that goes on a balance sheet, all right? That's the important stuff. Over on this side, when you're in finance, you're talking about the future. You're talking about instead of talking about controlling, you're talking about creating. You're bringing something new and interesting to the world, which is what you're going to exchange for money, obviously, that will end up over on the other side at some point, right? But it's the cart before the horse. You create a significant value that people want, and what shows up is you exchange that in the marketplace for this little thing called revenue, for money, right? So that's how that actually ends up working. And on this side, there's two things we're really concerned about: the creation of value, and secondly, the creation of valuation, which valuation is very different from value itself. It's the way you're creating valuation. You're creating you're capitalizing on the value. When you capitalize on the value, you're creating valuation, which makes your company worth a hell of a lot more, right? So it's kind of like the difference between sales and a sales system that can generate value over and over again. The ability to get one sale or get, or really, go out and pull teeth and get a sale over and over again. Interesting. There's value in that. You're obviously doing some value, but if you can systematize it and then you can then grow it and scale it and do all kinds of stuff, right? So that's again, you're actually capitalizing on that value is what I call valuation. It actually comes from something I talk with all the time. You'll hear me say this over and over again on this word capability. And I always distinguish between capabilities and abilities, right? That's where that started off from. And how I define capability is capitalizing on an ability. So you may have, for instance, an ability to drive a car, but can you capitalize on that? And you can think of like Uber and Lyft and things like that are companies that are massively enabling the capitalization of the ability to drive a car, right? If you were to instruct somebody else and create a manual and things like that, you're capitalizing on your ability to drive a car. If you create videos or assets in how to drive a car, you're capitalizing on your ability to understand how to drive a car. And of course, when you do that, when you capitalize on it, it changes the way you think of it because it's much more detailed than just being able to do the thing in the first place. All right. So anyway, quick thing there. So let's go forward and we're gonna drill into this a little bit more, and then we'll fill it out at the end and kind of show why this makes a big difference. So shows like The Profit, right? And we just mentioned this, tell the CEOs to know their numbers. Good thing. If you don't know your numbers, you're in big trouble. Because quite frankly, there are countless owners, this is absolutely true, right? How many times have we seen this? They don't have a clue about what their business is, right? You all get that out there, right? Absolutely. But, excuse me, and when they don't know their numbers, they aren't able to understand many of the challenges that their businesses are facing. And therefore, it's hard for them to understand how to grow and improve from where they are today, right? So that's why they say that. You've got to have that kind of information because that's one of the, it's not the only input, but it is a very important input into your equation. So instead of growing, they get reduced to solving short-term, important and urgent. Okay, that's from this. Remember that from the 90s? We had Covey, who had the 4 quadrants. They were he said urgent and important. Remember that? And the first quadrant was where you do everything that's urgent and important only. The second quadrant is not urgent but important. That was the important one, if you will, and the et cetera, until you get to the 4th one, which is not urgent, not important. Don't do those things, right? Kind of a thing. So anyway, I say that you got your urgent, important issues. You're doing those all day long, and you never get to the point of making systemic, long-term changes that build valuation. We just got into that. So instead, when you do business based on this urgency and important factor alone for any length of time, it turns what used to be fun into a nightmare. Are you there? Right? This is what I talked about originally. When did entrepreneurship become work? Because it didn't start that way. You know what I'm talking about. It did not start that way. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it, right? But then it gets turned into that because everything, and all of a sudden you find yourself potentially right back where you started when you were so motivated to get out there and do something on your own, right? So then there are the CEOs that live and die by the numbers. That's the other side of the equation. CFO style CEOs, right? They are thirsty for cost and revenue numbers and develop plans, what we just talked about, based on growing revenue and or reducing the costs, which I see that a lot, reducing costs especially, right? To change that final number because they're just worried about that number and everything comes down to that. And they completely neglect, in that case, value. And not all the time do they completely neglect it, but they neglect the majority of their time they spend over there versus working on creating value in the market. So the plans end up being things like, I'm going to double my revenue over the next 3 to 5 years. You know, I had somebody ask me this. I had a CEO at a major company that was a major pet food distributor. And we were sitting down and we were talking, and he asked me, he said, quite frankly, my goal for the next 3 to 5 years, in the next 3 to 5 years, I want to double my revenue. This is where this actually came from my mind. And I said, well, I can tell you how to do that easily. He goes, you can? I go, yeah, just double the amount of value you're delivering to the marketplace. Duh, right? Always driving it back into value. Because that's where all the value is. is on that side of the equation. It's a funner place to be anyway, but not that you have to take not that you spend all of your time over there. You need to be able to understand numbers, but I'm just saying that we need to work on that mix. And we'll get to that at the end here. So they put the numbers on a spreadsheet, calculate the average growth they need to make monthly in order to hit their numbers. That's what they're doing 100%. The good news is that the foundation for the changes they make have a basis in fact. That's good. And give them a clear focus. That's also, and that's for some people, and they could just barrel through it, that works, right? Their focus is, of course, growing money. But that focus is purely on changing the numbers that show up on the balance sheet, right? And the question I pose is, but can we actually grow money itself, right? We can't, because money is an exchange of value. That's it. Let's go back to it. What is money? Money is an exchange of value. It's an abstraction of value. What you're doing is saying, you give, instead of me giving you a hat for a pig or a gun for a pig, or whatever the exchange is, right? Which is very slow and cumbersome. I could say, oh, I can make this change for you right now. I could do it in terms of $1. For that particular value. Now I have that value stored in abstraction, and I can then go and trade with somebody else. That's what it is. That's been a huge, amazing thing for society. It's completely, allowed us to grow and scale like crazy, and to trade at a completely different level than would have ever been possible before. Of course, today, I mean, we trade with people all over the entire world, right? Constantly, all of us, all day long. It's crazy how much it's such a free exchange. But we have to understand that and put money in its actual place, right? That money has to always be rooted in some value exchanging between the buyer and the seller, if you will, always. And that is the big idea of the day. As an owner, the only way to move the business actually forward to grow your value is to grow value that gives you higher exchange rate. Wait a second, hold on a second. I said that wrong. Right? So as an owner, the only way to move the business forward is to grow value. That's what I'm trying to get at, right? And growing value gives you more to exchange at higher and higher rates. Okay, more to exchange at higher, and you create more value. The more value you create, the more you'll be able to exchange, and the higher rates you'll be able to get, because you're delivering more and more and higher value. If you focus on the other side on costs, let me just make the point clear. What you're doing is entering in a race to the bottom, right? That's what you're trying to do, and we don't want to do that, all right? Okay, so let's turn our attention to, a gentleman, I love Rob Slee. Rob Slee's fantastic, right? He does a thing called a V ladder in his book, Time Really Is Money, right? And it's trying to design to contrast the idea of a founder or business owner to climbing a ladder. He calls it a value ladder versus climbing the corporate ladder, right? Because you got the corporate ladder where they may have came from, right? So it looks like this is his version of this particular graphic. It's very interesting. And what you see is on the left-hand side, we've got tactical things we can do as an owner, as a founder, and we got strategic things up top we can do, right? And then on that same side, just to the right, you see a bunch of dollars per hour. So starting with starting with 100 at the bottom, where you're doing straight tactical stuff, and up to $1 million up top, right? In the middle is that DNA strand, if you will. And on the right-hand side, you see activities. And he lists out the kinds of activities and their worth to a founder. And actually, just to be square, he focuses really on the small to medium market, but really it's the small to medium market is where most of this come from. So if you look at these dollars, you may say, well, as a very, very small business, I may not be able to hit. So these numbers may not match, but the idea, the concept is 100% valid. All right, just to make sure we know where that's going. So at the bottom, what we're doing for $100 an hour means we're working in the business. Remember that from eMyth, working in versus working on the business. We do trained skill set, trades, apprenticeship, schooling, those kinds of things is what he categorizes as trained skill set. It's the stuff that you're already good at that you went in to do the business originally, right? But as you move up and you start doing you start setting up systems. So you may have, especially it says sales channels, but sales processes, sales systems. You're starting to, he calls, setting up key performance indicators as setting up systems. Those are a part of systems. Those are part of the measurement of systems. But your whole business is just simply a set of interconnected systems. And when you're building those systems out in a way that can be scalable and hopefully maybe even agile, so they're so that the value goes very, very high. In fact, I would suggest it even goes up higher than the $500 an hour that he's suggesting here. Then you're moving up another notch as you're growing your business and you're getting into creating culture. You're doing modeling, and you're also creating your mind share and market share. Those kinds of things are huge. Creating culture, I can't even begin to tell you. It's the last remaining competitive advantage is culture, yet nobody really knows what culture is. Culture is way more important than you think. Culture is what gives every company their complete and 100% differentiation in who they are, how they go to market, and what the customers experience. And you hear me say over and over again, there is no such thing as a product or service in the market. There's only an experience, and you're always delivering an experience, typically unbeknownst to yourself, all right? And anyway, then it gets really interesting because you're getting up into the 10,000, 50,000, and million plus market where you're actually doing transformative things either for your market, your industry, or for the business world in general. And when you're playing on those kinds of scales, you're doing something huge. This is where when the hardest thing to do in business is to do disruptive work because people aren't used to disruption. But the ones who successfully navigate and help to transform the world in some way, shape, or form, it's a huge reward because they're at the beginning of something exciting that comes from them. I think every founder has the ability to transform what they're doing. I insist that they do, absolutely, because that's what I come in and help them. I show them how to actually innovate, which you can bring. People confuse innovation. They get scared when I say innovate. They go, I can't innovate. I haven't done that, right? Not everybody. Some people love to innovate, but some people are really scared of it. And when people are scared of it, I'm like, no. What you're scared of is creativity. Creativity and innovation are two completely separate things. You can bring your creativity into innovation, but innovation is a much, much simpler concept that anybody can take advantage of. And it's a ball. And so why not play in that world and get into some of these levels of return in the transformational world? But you have to make time for that. You have to be on the building. You have to be on the value side, building value side of the equation, potentially systemic value, of course. All right, so the game we're playing as business owner is growing value. I've said it over and over again now, but there is a lot more to it than that. Ultimately, the reason business ownership is damned attractive is because not only can we earn an income, we can also increase the value of that underlying asset, which is what we ultimately want to be able to do, right? Creating a potential sizable windfall when we decide to sell the business. I mean, we could be in a lifestyle business and still creating value and still doing disruptive, transformative things, absolutely. And not worried so much about the underlying assets, worried about yourself and the value that you're getting from the interactions. I love that. I think that there's nothing wrong with that at all. But ultimately, that's what business is really all about, is creating values in a set of interconnected systems. Excuse me. All right, so this is where value comes into play. And as it turns out, the only way a company can increase their valuation is by developing systemic value. That is value that's repeatable and scalable and hopefully self-improving as you go forward. So the game as a business owner is playing is creating systemic value that makes the business worth more. Let's make it simple, right? So let's expand our comparison of the accounting versus finance that we started with, right? So we started with this, that we had the past and the future, we had the control, which is costs and revenues, and we have the creating value, which is about value and valuations. So let's complete the graphic. Here we go. Ready? The two things we have to play with in our businesses as founders is our and our employees' time and money. So where are we going to focus that time and money? Because those are both finite things, absolutely finite, right? Sometimes way more than we want. As a, you know, this as a founder, right? It's ridiculous. You can never find enough of them. Okay, so on the left-hand side, the point here is, as you move from focusing not at all on cost and revenue, which some people are at, right? And you move towards 100%, the more you move down that scale, your valuation craters. It's ridiculous because you're ignoring the other side. You're killing the goose that lays the golden egg. It's that simple. And on this, and by the way, on this side, what we have is as we look at the defining characteristics of the focusing on this side, we're dealing with money and numbers-based goals. This is a situation where this side is destroying innovation in a culture, typically, the ability to innovate in a culture. You're typically driving for more short-term results. How are we going to earn revenue? How are we going to earn revenue next year, the year after, et cetera? It makes doing business very, very, very painful because you're not focused on anything that's fulfilling, that's helping you out. This is where it becomes where entrepreneurship has become not fun anymore. And of course, it lacks the simple thing that I believe the world is in high demand for, and that's meaning and fulfillment from the work for you and your employees, etc. Right? So on the other side, we have the exact opposite. As we move closer towards 100%, our valuation multiplies, right? Now, again, there's a point of diminishing returns on both of these. I'm not saying they're a balance of 50-50 either. I think you need to play with it, but really, if I had to state what these should probably be as a founder, I would say I'd like you to spend 75 to 80% of your time in value creation, if you can. And by the way, when you do that, and you're doing that value creation and that strategic work, a typical work week is you can only get about 20 hours of that kind of work in, maybe 10 to 20 hours of that kind of work in max. So that's the other thing is very interesting, right? Because before your brain kind of runs out of the ability to do that work. Or so they say. Maybe you're unusual and you can bust beyond that. So it's a very interesting situation because you really need to work less, do more fun things to grow your business to ridiculous valuation. I mean, you see why I want to get the message out there. Why I'm trying to illustrate this so much, because this is the thing I think people don't understand, the plug and play between these two things. If you hire somebody to do the operational components on the left-hand side, that's probably the best thing to do is to get your people moving over here. What I do later on, I'll show you, is I'm completely about self-management systems that enable people, or self-management organizational models, I should say, models that allow your people to self-organize and to self-manage. And that really frees you up in a very big way. And it frees them up too, because what it does is it starts giving them ownership. But they have to have accountability. With ownership, it becomes a lot more accountability, not less, which is really funny. I love talking about that. But that's a much more interesting place to move to. All right. So on this side, though, this is what this kind of field attributes are. You're investing in value creation. You're building innovation into the culture in this particular regard, because everybody's seeing you do it. You're showing them how you do it. You're building your systems to enable innovation, etc. That's huge. You're going for long-term results. Long-term, I probably shouldn't even have that in there. You're building lasting things that will last, that will get better and better and better over time. But that's why they're lasting, because they're already built with the mechanisms to get better and better and better, which means that as market conditions change, they don't care. They just change. It changes right along with it. It takes that input, realizes what's happening, and spits it out. Very different way to do business. This makes doing business for the founder an engaging experience for the founder, and therefore everybody else around them, because everybody looks to who they are. That's the 100%, right? And of course, is meaningful and fulfilling. In other words, it is the greatest part of life itself that you end up doing. This becomes a thing that is, this is how I say, you move over to the right-hand side here and you're retired, because retirement is just doing one thing, spending more time doing the things you really want to do. And what you really want to be doing more than anything in life, always comes down to this, is you want to be doing things that are meaningful and fulfilling for you. Therefore, if you're doing this in your business, you're there already. So that's it in a nutshell. So what we've done here is we're now locked into the game that we're playing, which is creating long-term systemic value that improves cash flow and grows valuation in the long run by creating things that are lasting, right, and getting better all the time. So how does an owner play that game? That's for next time. So that's it. Anyway, leave your comments in here. I hope that was enjoyable. If it was, and you want to reach out and talk to me more about it, I would love to hear from you. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.